Hello, welcome back in my channel. So in today's video, we are going to build a secure cloud setup in our AWS account. And to make it fun, I will use basketball as our analogy where we can, I will try to explain everything that I'm building. Okay, so now let's take it as a basketball team preparing to play for championship. So first, the stadium that we have is going to be our AWS account. And inside, we are setting up two codes. One, in cloud term, let's use EC2 instances, okay? So one is our development environment. So basically, which is going to be our first code, and that's where the team will practice, experiment, test tools, and then practice new plays that the coach have for them, right? The second code is going to be our production environment. So this is where the game happens. Everything is real, and everything needs to be run smoothly and secure and with zero surprises, okay? So now that's what we are using. So remember, in AWS term is going to be two instances. Those two instances are going to be a development environment and then a production environment. And the development environment is going to be where the team will practice and then, do the practice, everything that they need. And then now, when it comes to the second environment, which is going to be production environment, that's where the team will definitely play the games, okay? So now, let's try to understand what's the difference between development environment and production environment. So development environment is like where you practice. It is okay to try new things, make changes if you need to, and even break stuff. It's fine. And it's where developers test their code and the feature that they created and stuff like that. So that's the development environment. So now when you go to production environment, it's like a live game. So everything must be stable, fast, protected, and only trusted users can have changes, can make changes, okay? So this is where the team will definitely everything go to prod, okay? So now that's the difference between development environment and then production environment, okay? So again, if you use basketball, the development environment is where the team practice, and then the production environment is going to be the court where the team will play games, okay? So make sure that we cannot make a mistake or stuff like that. Everything have to be smooth and stuff like that, okay? So now, how do we control who get access to this environment? So that's where AWS IAM comes in. So now it stands for Identity and Access Management. So it let us decide who can do what in our stadium. For example, think of IAM users as your team members, like players, coaches, and stuff like that, okay? So we will organize them into IAM groups, and then the first group is going to be the admin group. It's like the head coaches, they can do everything. They can start, they can stop, or manage both environment, because coaches, they have the right to set up practices, and then, and also when we have game, they're the one who are going to coach the game, okay? That's the first group that we have. And then now the second group is going to be the developers group. It's going to be like our assistant coaches, okay? They can practice, they can take us in practice into our first code that we have, but they're not allowed to touch anything when it comes to production. For example, when we have games, they're not allowed to call any plays. So the coach, the head coach, he's the one who will be able to call plays, and then he can call timeout and stuff like that because he's part of the admin group, okay? Let me repeat one more time. So we have two groups that we're going to set up here. The admin groups, which is her head coaches, okay? And then now the developers group, which is going to be the assistant coaches, that they can run the practices, but they cannot call out plays and stuff like that when it comes to, the real game, okay? So to make these rules, we are going to use something called policies, so which is going to be IAM policies, okay? So those policies are like playbook, and then rule books, and then they combine everything. So they define exactly what action each group is allowed to take. For example, the coaches, what they can do, and then the assistant coach, what they can do, and the staff members, what they can do, stuff like that. So those are the IAM policies, okay? So now, this is the plan that we have today. So we are going to launch two EC2 instances, which is going to be one for the development environment, and then the second one is going to be for production environment, okay? So as you remember, if you use basketball, it's going to be the first code, which is going to be for practice, and then the second code, which is going to be for real game, okay? And when we're done setting up those two environments, now the next step will be we create users, okay, which is going to be part of which group, okay? And when we're done, we have to set up a policy that will make sure to tell us exactly who has access to the production side and then who has access to the development side, okay? So now that's exactly what are we going to do today. Okay, now that we have covered the game plan, it's time to start building. But let's walk through step for our cloud security setup. So the first, what we're going to do first is to set up EC2 instance. We have two of them, and one will be named development instance, and then the second one will be production instance. Okay, so those are our virtual servers. So one, for example, is for experimenting our code without any problem, and the other one need to be locked down for just serious business. So we cannot let anybody have access to the second one, which is going to be our production. Okay, and when we're done, we are going to create policies and groups. Next, that's what we're going to do. So just set up the rules of what we have. Okay, and then now we will create the IAM group called admins, and then the other one is that will have full access to both environment, which is our coaches if we use the basketball analogy again. So the admin group is going to be the coach. He'll have access to the code 1 and code 2. And then now we'll create developer group which have a limited access. They only can, have access to the practice gym that we have, the practice code. Okay. And then now when we're done, we will have to write IAM policies where it's going to be the rule book, and then we attach them to each group. Make sure that everyone plays their position. Everyone know exactly where they have access and where they don't have access. Okay. And when we're done with that, that's our step 2. And then the step 3 is gonna be to set up an AWS account alias. Now we make things more professional and personal here. By default, your IAM users have to log into using like AWS account, right? But to fix that, we will create an AWS account alias, something like, we can name it however we want, but it's just like another way to let all the users to have access to the account without going to the main account that we have, the default account. Okay. And then now the step 4 when we're done, is going to be gain time if we're still using basketball. And then now that's where we are going to log in as admin users, test if you have access to both sides, which is going to be dev environment and the production environment. And then now we are going to log in as a developer users, and now to make sure that they can only have access to the dev instance, which is going to be our practice code. Okay. And now when we're done with that, if everything works well, we are going to make sure our security is very tight, and also our cloud team is playing by the rules. Okay. And that's how your AWS secure, that's how you secure your AWS. Okay. Organizations and then enterprise level, they want to make sure that they know exactly who have the right access to wherever they have going on. Okay. And then you cannot let everybody have access to your stuff. You gotta make sure to set up the correct policies, make sure that these people know that they have access to other part of it. Okay. So now that we have explained it, hopefully it was a little bit clear to everyone. And now let's go ahead and start building. All right. As you can see here, I'm in my AWS console. Okay. So now what we want to do first is we want to go ahead and look for EC2. As you can see, this is the service here, and then you click on it. And then now before we do anything, let's try to understand exactly what is a EC2. And then EC2, it stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. Okay. And then now it's basically a service that Amazon has let you rent, for example, a virtual computer in the cloud. For example, instead of that computer being for example, in front of you, and this one is going to be in the cloud. It's not going to be something that you physically can see. Okay. So it's going to be the cloud. And then that's why that's why they call it as EC2. It is like Elastic Compute Cloud. Okay. And as you can see, if you need more understanding of EC2, you definitely can read through this right here, or you can do a lot of research about EC2. And that's what I do. If I wanted to understand one thing, I'll go ahead and then do a lot of research about it. Okay. And then now a lot of people, they love EC2 because of, as you can see, say EC2 offer unlimited scalability and control, scalability and control. Okay. And you have highest level of control, the entire technology, what you need, and then the server that you have there. And there is a lot of option that you can have, and it is very available into different location. And then you can choose different compute, for example, Linux, Windows, and Mac, and this is basically how they explain exactly what is Amazon EC2. Okay. So now that we understand exactly what is EC2, let's go ahead and click on launch EC2, which is, we are going to launch our first EC2, which is going to be, remember, we have 2 EC2 that we need to launch, which is going to be, the first one is the development environment, and then the production environment. Okay. So now that's where we go. So now here we can go ahead and start creating this EC2. All right. Now here we can go ahead and create our first instance. So it's going to be let's see, post that instance. Okay. So we just change it here. There you go. So now that's going to be our first instance that we have. Okay. Let me just add a tag here. So basically the tag, it is, let me put in here. Let's just add for, and just name it as production, okay? Use that. And resource type, you can leave it as it is, for instance, okay? So now a tag is just basically a way to identify resources that can go together, That's why we use tag, okay? So now I'm just gonna go ahead and then use that tag right there. And after that, we can use this service right here, which is gonna be Amazon Linux 2023. Make sure that it is free tier eligible. As you can see here, they have different resources, but we don't need none of them today for this project. So this is what we need, which is the first one right here. So we're going to stay with it. And then pretty much we can leave everything else as it is, as default, but also make sure that you are in a free tier eligible. And then now the key pair, we are going without a key pair. So basically a key pair is a way that if you wanted to have access to this instance via SSH, you will definitely need a key pair. But on this project, we don't really need to use it. So we are going to stay with the default one, which is, we don't need any key pair here. Okay. And then next, what we have next is going to be network setting. We can leave as default because we don't need anything. And also let's just make sure that we stay with the free tier eligible right here. And then now when we're done, we can go ahead and then click on to launch. Okay. So now we are launching our first EC2 instance, which is going to be the production environment. Okay. So now let's double check, make sure that we have our first EC2. As you can see, it is right here. This is the first one that we created and it is running right now. Okay, so let's just give it a time. Okay, looks like it's running right here. Now let's go ahead and then create the second one. Okay, looks like the name didn't come through here. So let's go ahead and then let's go ahead and then create, put the name again. So it's going to be fall pro. Okay, there you go. We have our name now. That's our name right here. So now look, we can go ahead and then launch the second one. And also wherever you are, make sure to choose the right region which is closest to you. And as you can see, I'm choosing Ohio and I'm staying with that one for the whole project. Okay. So now we can go ahead and then launch our second EC2. So here, let's give it the name as fall and hold on just a second. Okay. Let's name it dev instance. Okay. Always put it in here. There you go. So that's going to be the second one, and then you can go ahead and add a tag into it. Let's see. Okay, let's do this. I think that's why the first one didn't have the name, didn't come through for the instance. Okay, and then now let's see the tag, new tag, and then the name will be again for. And then here we already have the production. Let's just do the second one as development. All right. And then now we don't need, let's just keep it the free tiers here, and also everything. We don't need a key pair. And then here, the network setting, we can leave it as default. And let's make sure that we are in the free tier here. And then let's go ahead and launch our second instance. Okay, enter. Okay, so now we have our two instances. Okay, they are running, the first one and the second one right here, and they're both running. Okay, as you can see here, we have the first one is checked, it already passed the check, and the second one is in the initialization phase. Okay, so now those are the ones that we need to choose. We choose of environment and then the dev environment. Okay, either or dev environment and product environment. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move into the next step. We are here to create the policy. What you want to do is you want to come here and then type IAM, and then when you have the IAM come out, you want to right click and then open into new link. So when you have a new link here, this is where we are right here, and you want to go ahead and then click on policies. And then now, as you can see, this is a different policy that we have here, but what we need today is go ahead and create a new policy. And as you can see, you can choose different services to have the visual one, but now what we need is going to be JSON. So now, as you can see, this is the JSON that we have. We do not need this default JSON. I'm going to delete it here and then put my own JSON policy, and then I will explain everything on what we have into the new JSON policy that I will put here. Okay, what I did here was I delete the default policy that I found here, and after deleting the default policy, I have posted this policy right here. So as you can see here, this policy, it shows us that whoever has access to our policy, whoever we assign this policy, they will be able to have access to our EC2. As you can see here, all they have access to all. Okay, so now alongside with the EC2, we have tagged the EC2 instance that we create, which is the development. So this is the tag that we gave this EC2 instance, okay, which was the fall development. So now that's we allow them have access to it, and then they have all full access of that EC2. And as you can see here, we allow them to read all the description and everything that they need to find into those EC2. And what are we denying them is they do not have access to all the tags that, for example, the instance, they cannot have access to it. And then now they cannot add or they cannot delete or create any other tag. We deny that access. Okay. So that's basically what this JSON permission, the policy that we set up here. And also one thing I forgot to mention here about this deny right here. So we denying them access to create tag or delete any tag in all the instances that we have. We denying them the process, for example, having the access to create or delete any tag here. So this is the last thing that I wanted to add on. All right, now after explaining this here, we can go ahead and click on next here. You see dev environment policy. Okay, so now the description would be IAM policy for development. Hold on, I'm missing something here. Development environment. Okay, so that's gonna be the description that we have. And then here, basically the permission that we set, this is exactly what it's explaining. So we're denying inside of our EC2 that we are tagged here, we deny access to create or like other tags and stuff like that. But at the same time, we are allowing them to have full access of all resources of our EC2. As you can see here, we have all resources and access level, which is like list, permission, management, read, write, all those kind of access. But here we're denying access to based on the tag that we have, like the possibility to create or delete tags and stuff like that, as you can see here. Okay, so now when we're done, we can go ahead and click on create policy, and as you can see, now our policy was successfully created. All right, it's time